Well, welcome to Philippi Conversations podcast, episode 17. I literally had to go into our archive and figure out what episode this is, and welcome to the 17th episode.
It's my favorite number.
Yeah,
Wow.
so this podcast exists because we believe the gospel transforms lives, and we think gospel conversations can become a mechanism for life change. So that's why we do this, and we break rule number 1 on this podcast, which according to YouTubers, rule number 1 is don't make your content too broad, because apparently it's hard to grow a podcast that way. We don't really care. So we think the gospel applies to everything. So we cover a range of topics on this podcast. And this morning, I'm super excited to talk about Christianity and the arts. And I'm joined by some dear friends, Jeremy and Mera Oliveria. You guys, I mean, your names just rhyme so well. I mean, Jeremy.
That's how I knew she
and
was
Mera Oliveria. I mean, that is like out of a kid's book.
What's your name? Okay. You'll do.
It's money.
Wow.
Man, it's money.
Well, there's that silent I that kind of threw me off when I first met him. Because it looks like it's spelled Oliveria.
What is with that Oliveria?
It's so annoying. If I'm talking to someone that I'm never going to talk to again, like, you know, I just say Oliveria.
Oliveria.
Like, I'm just like Jeremy Oliveria.
Yeah.
Yep. DMV.
That makes sense.
Oliveria.
Yeah, just to make it easier. Well, you know, we've known each other for a while. You know, Jeremy and I, we've known each other since homeschool testing in 8th grade. Yeah. And then, you know, met Mera when you guys, you know, got together. And so we've been, you know, friends for a while, but you guys have recently started coming to Philippi, which is super cool. We have a little more overlap with you guys, which is great. You guys have 3 beautiful kids. You guys are married, Florence, Caspian, and Atticus. You guys picked awesome names.
Thank you.
By the way, I mean, just you guys are good at that. Might be a spiritual gift that you have. So. Yes. If anyone's looking for good baby names, just call these guys.
We're done.
I got a whole list of them.
You got a list of unused material?
Yeah.
Sweet. So here's why these guys are here, other than the fact that I just love them. They're awesome. We're going to talk about arts and Christianity and how those two things fit together. And Mera is, and I'm not just saying this, like Mera is probably one of the best artists I've ever seen. She does like, and I'm not just saying that, like literally when I see your stuff, I'm like, are you kidding me? Like you did that. Yeah, you're world class, and you do, and my vocabulary limits my ability to explain what you do, so you'll have to help. But chalk, some of it's chalk, some of it's paint, right? Different forms.
Yep, oil painting, and then I've done some chalk murals, like through chalk festivals and things like that. But
it's incredible.
Thank you.
So yeah, and then Jeremy is an accomplished worship leader, musician, songwriter, and now full-time producer and audio engineer. Would that be pretty accurate?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
I wouldn't say accomplished worship leader, but
accomplished. I would say you're pretty accomplished.
I'll take it.
I don't know what that means, but it sounds good. So my point being that these guys are both in the world of the arts, and you guys are both very much you swim in the world of the arts, and whether it's music or whether it's painting, and so and you guys are both really, really good at it, and you guys love the Lord. So I thought this would be a good conversation to have. Particularly, you know, God has brought just a lot of artsy people, just a lot of artists into our church, a lot of people that do theater and do music and do painting. And I just thought, man, it would just be a cool opportunity to talk about that and what that looks like. So hopefully they'll serve everybody listening. So our topic today is Christian art. What is it? Should we do it? And what makes it Christian? Okay, so that's going to be kind of interesting to dive into.
It's my favorite conversation.
Perfect. One of the things that's so rad about the way God put together Philippi is that we have a lot of artists, and I think I see people come into Christianity and they go, okay, what does this mean for my art now? Do I have to like stop doing that, or do I just have to like paint crosses now instead of, you know? So I want to get into that and talk to that a little bit, and seeing, you know, is art worship? Can art be ministry? What does that all look like? So before we dive too deep into that, I'd love to just kind of give a little background on you guys. Give us maybe just a brief snapshot of your story with your art form, how you got into it, and how Christ and the gospel has really shaped and influenced your guys' individual art. You want to kick that off, Jeremy?
I will. So I grew up in a Christian homeschooling environment, homeschool testing.
Boom.
And my parents were very supportive of like music and lessons, and very, very blessed and lucky, feels like, just to have such supportive parents. But growing up in the 90s, early 2000s, and the Christian culture of the time, like, I don't know if you remember, like, the big songs were literally like 1,000-Foot Crutch, like Throw Up Your Rock Fist, POD, We Came Here to Rock This Jam, Spread His Love as the Master Plan, KJ52, the Mountain Dew song.
Oh, you mean, I'm sorry, KJ5 Tweezy?
Is that what it's?
Let's just get it right.
Yeah. And so it's like fun. It was like fun youth group music,
but it was terrible. Let's be honest.
Music, it never moved me. Like, it never. It just. I mean, DC Talk. I love DC Talk. Their early stuff is so great. But I remember, so it was about 13 or 14 was the first time I heard like Bob Dylan or like Radiohead or like these incredible artists. And it was the first time that I was like genuinely moved by a song, and it resonated with my human experience. It was just so honest and so authentic. And the interesting thing was, I remember feeling like, this is real. Like, this feels so real, like resonates with my human experience. And it honestly really started to shape what I thought was what I wanted to do. It wasn't like listening to POD and be like, I'm going to do this. This is awesome. I want to do music. It was these artists that were just incredible. And it just felt like they were actually coming from a place of like trying to encompass their human experience.
Yeah. It seemed like there just wasn't a lot of variety really in the Christian arts. Like, it's particularly in music, because you and I played in a band, you played in a band, we played together, and we were kind of like trying to fit a mold of what we thought Christian music needed to kind of sound
100%.
like. And it was kind of like, if you don't fit that mold, you can't really be in the Christian space, right?
Totally. Yeah. Everything from like you have to use these certain phrases, you have to,
right.
And I think that's why you look at like Air One, and I know there's a lot of great artists on there that are like authentic. But for the most part, they've created a brand in a lot of Christian culture, especially in the 90s and early 2000s. I think we're seeing a cool shift in that. But was literally just catering to this Christian culture. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was just very specific. But I'd say it was part of the story. They would share it, but it wasn't the whole story. So it just feels inauthentic and detached from our reality. And so I actually didn't become a follower of Jesus until I was 20. Like, I grew up in a Christian home, and had a great like upbringing.
Which is funny, because we were both in Christian bands, and neither of us were Christians.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It's all about
that tells you a lot about
Christian
art.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
But when I actually became a follower of Jesus, that was the first thing that there was only like 2 artists that were like, wow, these guys are doing it. It was Josh Garrels and John Mark McMillan at the time. There's like so many now. But I just, becoming a follower of Jesus is such a like huge life shift. And it was just so, like everything was so tangible, like I was like, I can't even believe this is real, but it is. I'm experiencing grace. I'm experiencing all of these beautiful things in my soul, peace, healing. And then, so I know we're going to talk about this a little later. But that definitely was like it's definitely been a journey trying to discover, is
that your phone?
Yeah.
Classic millennial.
Yeah.
I did the same thing a couple podcasts ago.
Yeah. Trying to discover what that looks like for our journey and our, I'd say, calling as, but we'll get into that a little
It's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. I know a lot of your story, Jeremy, but Mera, I've never really heard much of your story with art and how you got into it and how the Lord got a hold of it. And
yeah. Well, I didn't grow up in the church. I came to know the Lord when I was 19. So I don't know how long ago that was. 14 years ago.
Yeah. How old are you?
You're going to ask me that?
On the air. Yeah, totally.
33.
Hey, I'm 33 too.
Are you 33?
In a week.
Yes, 33.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we are.
You're going to be 33.
It's a very,
wait, when's your birthday?
It's a very Jesus-y age.
Yes, it is.
In a week, May 17th.
Oh, his is May
6 days.
20.
May 20?
What day? No, May 26th.
Dude, now we're gonna get way more presents because everyone watching this is gonna be like, oh.
Yes. Yes.
When is it? 26th. None of this. I'm sorry. None of this matters to the audience. Okay.
Yeah, it does. It's true.
It matters. It totally matters. It's our life. Yeah. Get over it. Okay.
No, here's my Venmo and Cash App though.
Yes.
I like gift cards and food. Okay. Good.
Yeah. I didn't. So met the Lord when I was 19. As far as art goes, I've always loved art, but I wasn't necessarily very good. I wasn't, my skill didn't develop until actually after I became a Christian. So, once I did, I don't necessarily know exactly how to like answer this question because I feel like the story of my art and my life has always been kind of intertwined. Like I don't think I can separate it from just like myself. Cause I mean, some of the earliest memories I have are of drawing and, one of my grandmas, I don't remember which one she asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, an artist. And she said, I believe you can. So, I mean, but like, I didn't go out and think I'm going to be an artist because my, life coming to know the Lord, it was like, like walking on a path and then things just like different tumultuous things going on. And then it kind of, your life gets completely shifted and changed. And then here I am now. And, definitely know for sure that art is a part of what Jesus is inviting me to do in my life. And I mean, nothing brings me greater joy than thinking about God and his creativity. Which I mean, that might sound super Christian, but I'm just saying like, I know that this is like one of my life sources is like understanding the creator, like Jesus as a creator. And, I don't know, practicing it alongside. It's not always easy. And I have 3 kids, so I don't get a lot of time to paint right now, but which, that's a whole nother side to being an artist and a mother and a Christian. There's so many different, expectations that we carry about parenting and art. And I mean, even right now in today's culture, like I hear a lot of artists really afraid of having kids because of how demanding it is, which in reality, it really truly is. And that was definitely a struggle for me when I first became a mom. And I like to talk about it because I don't think it gets talked about a lot in the church. Especially not growing up in the church and thinking that, having the same view of sort of like motherhood, as I think a lot of girls in the church grow up with, which I'm not saying was good or bad. I'm just saying it was a lot different. So, and my mom was awesome. I'm just saying that, once I became a mom and art, that was definitely part of my journey because it was really humbling to sort of take away the thing that you love and also the thing that you think makes you special and like having to just give that up. Right. And then and one of the things that the Lord is teaching me is like, anytime you're turning away from something, like you're turning to something better. Sounds so cliche, but really if that thing is the person of Jesus, right, then you will always be exceedingly grateful. Yeah. And one of the things God showed me was like his identity as an artist and a father, they're not mutually exclusive. He is creator and he is father. I am mother and I'm artist, which I don't know. That's really good. But as far as my art goes, I know. I don't know. Hopefully that answers the question. Totally. Like it's still, I feel like the story is still forming as well because like, being an artist and creating art, it's so intertwined with your personality, but also your identity and how you see your identity, how sometimes you might feel like you don't have one and you need to form one. So when it comes to creating art, I think you guys might relate to that as musicians. Like I think a lot of artists feel like, oh, look, I'm creating this art and it's sort of something to show for myself. And as a Christian, it's kind of something that we're supposed to like, quote unquote, like not do. But in reality, it's like, sort of understanding more, how does this just flow out of me as the person that God made me to be? And sort of learning to like live and practice art in that way. So as far as that goes, like, I think that's been my journey is learning like, hey, this isn't just my identity. Like I'm not just what I have to show for myself, but I'm who God has created me to be. And that takes a lot of, I think, courage and humility to stand up and be like, this is who God made me to be. Because I think so much, for my story, is so much of it is battling the feelings of inadequacy. So to be able to say and stand like I'm an artist, I think it takes a lot more than we realize when we hear someone say that.
Yeah.
Because it also we also don't necessarily feel validated to say like I'm an artist. Well, what constitutes an artist? Did I make a certain amount of art? Did I make it a certain way? Am I at a certain level? You know what I mean? And like, there's just so much complication. Yeah. But in reality, if you're an artist, like we'll talk more about probably idea of creativity is more than just decorative art. But like artists are people who, I don't know, they see the world in a way that God intentionally made them to see it as. And that's the gift that we offer to the world. I feel
like you brought up really kind of so many huge points there. And one probably needs to be number one in defining what a Christian artist is a Christian artist is a Christian who's an artist, right? Like,
yeah.
And I think that's like the thing we all struggle with putting yourself into anything. Like for me in this season, my art is writing sermons, which is both theology and art, right?
Yes.
And like being able to create something, but then recognize that something you created is not who you are.
Yes.
And being able to remove your identity really is the central defining difference between a Christian artist and an artist, right? Is to go like, I am a Christian first. And because I'm a Christian, like how you said, art flows out of me, but it isn't who I am. And it's not what I look to for my identity. It's something that I can create and produce.
Yeah. Good luck. It's hard.
Oh yeah. It's super hard. Yeah.
I really like the whole idea, Mera, of that you said of it really is a turning. It's not a necessarily, I mean, it might feel like giving up something certain times, but it really is. I think this is just true of the whole Christian walk. It's literally just always an invitation. There's always an invitation to something deeper and to something, because it is Jesus at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I really like that frame of thinking, because it's hard sometimes, especially when you want to do something, or there's a cool opportunity, or you have this creative idea, and you're like, well, I can't work on this because I have 3 children, or I have these. Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
I really love that.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of artists that can relate, especially mother artists who can relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let me kind of frame this out a little bit. I want to get into kind of this question of like, what is Christian art? Is that even the right terms? Is that even the right?
Yeah, let's talk about it. It's my favorite thing.
And like, what makes something Christian? You know, I always make a joke. I don't know if it's funny or not, but I just keep making it. That someone says it's like Christian music or it's a Christian band. I'm like, cool. So does that mean that the CD goes to heaven? Like, does that mean that the art itself gets to be preserved, or, you know, what does it mean?
We're going to hear this song in heaven.
There's actually a verse, I don't know it, but it talks about in Revelations, it says, the book of Revelation, it says, all of the cultures, or the best parts of cultures enter into the gates. I should find the reference.
Yeah, that's intriguing.
I heard that from Brian Boyson, who's a pastor.
Yeah, that's amazing to think about. Yeah, but that's kind of the paradigm. It's like, so what makes something? So I think you and I, again, growing up listening to these Christian bands, it was like, are you the whole paradigm was always like, are you a Christian band or are you a Christian in a band, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it was always kind of this like, well, you need to be a Christian band means you need to sing about Christian things, and then there were these other guys who were like, well, I'm just a Christian and we don't sing about Christian things, but I'm a Christian in the band, and what sanctifies the band, and what sanctifies the art, and so maybe just to kind of put it this way, you know, I think a lot of people come to Christ and they have in their former life, they've done art and they had a reason for doing art, and they had a method for doing art, and they had a purpose in doing art. And then their life is given over now to Christ, which changes everything. And so what does sanctified art look like? I think the default, right? It's kind of the Martin Luther thing. Like, what makes a shoemaker, a Christian shoemaker? Does it mean he has to put crosses on all the shoes, or does it just mean that he makes really good shoes and gives the glory to God? What are your guys' thoughts when you think about that? Understanding what Christian art is, or if that's even the right way to think about it.
Yeah, I think that's a super important question that a lot of people have. And it's a journey. It's been a journey to kind of figure out what I actually think about all that. I think becoming a Christian, and right after, like within a year after I got saved, I was like involved with this group where we were just touring around the country playing at like mostly churches. And it was interesting because the more like Christianese you got with your songs, the better they did.
Yeah.
And the more the church would resonate with, like the more like albums you would sell. And I don't know, the more like kudos you'd get in that realm. And so it's easy to be like, all right, this is, because you genuinely want to do something that's honoring and pleasing to the Lord. So it's like, okay, is this just what is sanctified art looks like? But I think the longer I've been a follower of Jesus, it feels like it's far more important about who you are as a redeemed person. I think Francis Schaeffer talks about this a lot, where he, I forget that book, that small book. What's that called?
Art in the Bible.
Is that the really small one?
Mm-hmm.
It's called Art in the Bible.
Art in the Bible. And the Bible. And then he has one other one that's included usually in that. It's like an essay, 2 essays, but I don't know the name of the other one.
Look into this.
Yeah, he says, because I think a lot of the like, you feel like you have to fit the whole thing in one song or one piece of art. Like, well, we got to talk about the cross. We got to talk about resurrection.
Right.
And
to say the word Jesus in there.
Got to say the word Jesus, because if someone just hears this one song, I don't want them to walk away with like not hearing the gospel. But what happens is there's, and you talk about this a lot, is they're not actually always telling the whole story. Like there's literally, look at Psalms. It's literally filled with like some serious stuff of dealing with depression, with like desperation, with when you like lamenting. And there is so much in there that's still directed towards who God is, and it's still, you know what I mean? It's still a conversation with him. But it's not like, I think it's Psalm 51. It doesn't like end on like the best note. You know what I mean? It's not like it's all going to work out. It's fine. And in a cosmic sense, we do believe that, right? But I think there's
certain moments where it doesn't feel like it's going to get good.
And it's okay to write a song that doesn't actually end with a redemption, because but Francis Schaeffer talks about you take your whole catalog of art, or your whole, like all the art you create should actually be like a full picture of the gospel. And even if it's not saying the name of Jesus, there should be like a holistic expression. And I really like that, because it's not like, okay, this is it. This is my shot. This one song needs to have every piece of truth I believe. But maybe it's just expressing one part of being a human in this world, and the feelings that you feel. But I think you can kind of get to the point, you see artists doing this, where they just stay in that space, and like every song is so depressing. Right. You know what I mean? And I think different people have different callings. You know what I mean? Like, and I just want to make a point to separate, like, I think congregational worship, I'm not talking about congregational worship.
Right. Separate category.
That's a separate category for me, because that's a specific purpose.
Right.
And I want to sing the name of Jesus.
Yep. Absolutely.
You know what I mean? I don't want to be like, well, this is only lament. Because I think that's a very specific purpose for corporate worship, corporate singing. Yeah.
It almost speaks to the problem of the church not necessarily supporting art outside of the Sunday worship experience.
Oh yeah.
So it's like,
that's good.
It does have a different purpose. There's like a worship purpose, like ecclesiastical purpose in church. And then if you have art outside of that environment, it's obviously not serving that same purpose for the Sunday morning practice, but the church doesn't necessarily consider that like a valuable thing to put resources into, things on the outside. And there's a lot of different reasons and probably like trains of thought that have led us to that point. I'm not saying necessarily that it's wrong or right, but as far as Christian art getting created outside of the church, I mean, it does take patronage and like and financing money to like create the art. So it makes sense that a lot of it is really only stuck in kind of like that one category.
Right. I think the church doesn't know what to do with their artists sometimes. And that's kind of one of the reasons I want to do these kinds of conversations, because I think it's like we have this very narrow idea of what we see as applicable to a church service. It's just probably right? Like, I don't know if like a church service necessarily should have too much but like in the way that we use our gifts, in the way that we see our gifts as being beneficial to the body. I mean, there was a really cool picture this Sunday. Like
I saw that.
Yeah. So, this Sunday we were just taking a moment to just kind of grieve with some of our brothers and sisters that had lost a baby, this week. And River had painted this painting, that just was so I think if I can use the word prophetic and just, it was something that clearly embodied what was happening right then in the church. And then it was like, it was raining at the same time, and we put up the piece of art. Yeah. And it was just like, wow, like what a cool thing that God impressed this on River's heart, and she painted it, and it ministered to them. And, and it really became like the imprint of the moment. It kind of embodied the moment. Yeah. And I just thought, wow, that's cool. Like, and it got me excited about this podcast. It got me excited about like, what could it look like for art to have a more central feature, a more central role in our, in the way we think about the body ministering to one another.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, when you if you look at the origins of creativity, and we have to consider like God was exercising creativity first. Right. So as his image bearers, like we are going to reflect his way of exercising creativity to a certain extent. But at the origins of creativity, they are relational. The origins of creativity is relational, it's communal, and it's communicative, because that is the way that God exercises creativity. And it's the way that we see it exercised as human beings.
And when you say that, do you mean like, because in order for art to really be fully like expressed, it needs to be both created and experienced, created and seen?
Well, kind of thing, that is definitely a facet of art, which is really hard to define, because actually when you start to define art, it sort of, you instantly start leaving out creative expressions that you could consider art. So like if you describe that as just visual, you're foregoing audio or, music. If you describe it as just those things, then you're forgetting like dance. And then you have design, and there's so many things that kind of, it just keeps sprawling to the point that like, I think it's like a philosophical concept where it becomes like an open concept, where it's like not necessarily something you can really truly pin down, because creativity actually is like the building block of culture. I mean, God's creativity is like, it's the foundation of all reality, really. So in a sense, like we're sort of creating in that image. But what I mean by communal is like, if you look at the overarching story of scripture, you have creation, the fall, redemption, restoration. God's creativity is functioning in every chapter, and its purpose within each one is for relationship. So even when he anoints the artist to create the temple, like that, the result of it was God's dwelling with man. And that was the same with like, at the creation account at the end of the garden, that was the point, like God was dwelling with man. And then when we see, like Jesus, redemption. I always mix up restoration and redemption in my mind. When we see redemption, we see the same idea. It's like the Holy Spirit indwelling the human temple, and like God's, the Trinity choosing a creative act to make Jesus' resurrection the first fruit of new creation. So in the same way that the Trinity chose to create all that exists, we see it exercising that in the same way when it creates the new creation. And that started with us as like a communal place for God to dwell. And then that is our commission, is to like, with our creativity, create environments, cultures where people can dwell with God. And that's the purpose of the church, is to, it's not to get us out of earth, but it's to restore all of creation back to its original purpose, which was to dwell for heaven and earth to dwell as a unity under the kingdom of God. Wow. So, which is the reign of God. And yeah, so that's what our creativity is restoring to. And then when you see the end of restoration, that's what it says at the end, is like, God said, it says, a word was heard, or a voice was heard coming from the throne, that God's dwelling place would be with man. Yeah. And that was like his whole point. And that was like the goal of all of it when he exercised creativity, was this relational communal thing that like our creativity is meant to do. So when it comes to church, the church environment, there's so many implications that you could make about the way we practice church within that, and using artists. And I mean, there's like history for the American church that we have to unpack as to why our church environments are so, I don't know. Not to use like, I guess bland would be one way to describe it, which I'm not saying that in a negative way. It's just a matter of fact.
Well, more utilitarian, is that the right word?
Yeah, sure. Like I think a lot of times we think if the art doesn't have a purpose, like if it's not evangelical, like functional, evangelism kind of means that it's like, what are we using for? Like beauty is beauty, and is beauty excess? Well, No, I don't think so, because when God created everything, he put, I mean, it says the trees were good for food and sight, like good to see and to eat. And he was complete when he made everything. So was it an excess for him to make it beautiful?
Yeah.
No.
I mean, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
keep going.
Like when we forsake that in our church environments, we're also presenting a message to the world that it doesn't really matter to us.
Right.
And when we say it's excess, we're also making a huge claim about what it might mean for people who, so if a lot of times people use argument that like, you know, like we should give to the poor before we use money to make a building beautiful. That's true, probably. Like we should actually be practicing love with our creativity. If we're only focusing on making things aesthetically glorious, like the Roman Catholic Church, which was the Christian church, then yeah, that's an injustice. But it also says something about like what we think about environments in general, and that that people who are in need don't necessarily also appreciate having a beautiful environment to engage with. And we were supposed to be inviting people like in.
Right.
So like when we do spend like resources on making our spaces beautiful and seeing art as further than just like some utilitarian thing, like it was meant to be shared. It wasn't meant to just be hoarded.
Right.
Because we were designed as like human beings to actually experience beauty
and to share it in community. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you got me thinking all these things right now. I'm just thinking about, you kind of mentioned this idea that art could be a broader category and it's kind of hard to define. And it kind of just got me thinking, you know, you have the spectrum of different types of human beings. Yeah. You have people that are creative, but you also have people that are very organizational. But really, organization is creative in a way because it's organizing. It's taking something that's maybe out of order and it's putting it into order.
God bless those people.
Well, what's so cool, like you think about God's redemptive work, and He's really doing all of that. He's organizing, and that was the cultural mandate. He told Adam to go and really cultivate, take the raw material of the garden and take it and turn it into something better. Yeah. And that's what God's doing throughout history, is what He's going to do when He recreates the heavens and the earth. And when we, as the Imago Dei, we get to sort of echo that when we do anything that is making things better. So raising kids is cultivation. You know, it's not blank canvas, because you can't control as much as you think you can before you have kids, right? But it is cultivation. Someone taking something that is dilapidated and broken and turning it into something, restoring it, is kind of art, right?
Yes.
It all is reflecting the image of God, who is both creator and sustainer and organizer and cultivator and all of those things. And what's so fun, like for me, my art in this season is writing sermons. And what I love about writing sermons is it's kind of everything. It's creativity, but then it's also like archaeology. I'm just like, what does the text say? I don't need to get cute and creative. What does it say? And then it's organization. How do I take all of these thoughts that were creative thoughts and how do I organize them? And then presentation. It's like all of the things I love about life all wrapped up in one. And what you do with, in fact, really what both of you guys, when I think about the process of writing a song, it's like creative space. What about this? What about this chorus? What about this verse? What about this concept? But then it's organization. You know, what you do as an audio engineer is very much organization. It's this frequency needs to go. This compressor needs to be added. This, you know, this thing needs to be dialed in a little bit tighter. And so really you could just say, well, you're just an artist, but actually you're doing all of those things. Or when you do a painting, and I'm not as familiar with painting, right? But you start with getting your ratios right? And getting there's an organizational sense of like, how big should this person's head be on this canvas, right? And I don't just start painting, right? I mean, there's a sense of almost math to it, right? Like things need to be, and like live sound is math. Like the notes of a scale and why certain notes go together really is a mathematic equation, like the circle of fifths. And so it's crazy how you know, I guess what I'm getting at, and you just got me thinking about this, like we are almost wrong to over separate arts from organization or administration, because really they're all the sense of restoration and creation that God has sort of set humanity on to do, you know?
Yeah.
Love it.
Absolutely.
That's good.
Yeah. And then when I think we think art has to be explicit, like you guys were talking about how it needs
That's
to
the
have
word.
John 3:16. Don't forget that he
Right.
rose again on the third day.
You put a fish sticker on it.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
like,
This is a song about my wife, but at the end, I'm going to quote John 3:16.
Boom, Christian.
and she said
Print
to me
it.
before she fell asleep.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, like one of the best examples of art functioning without that is the parables, when Jesus talks about things and uses stories. And I think people try to say that the parables were supposed to make things make sense, but they do not make sense. At the time, they were so puzzling. They didn't have,
Right.
however long we've had to sit there and figure out what he meant. They were like, huh? And he was using their everyday items to portray some kind of idea, taking what they were familiar with and giving them a new way to look at it. And it even says in Mark that at a certain point he didn't talk to people without using parables,
Right.
and he didn't explain them except for to his disciples when they asked him.
Right.
And I think that is so important, because we don't have to have in our art pieces every single part of the gospel presented, especially in our age when so much of it has so much baggage that when you see a cross, you see certain aspects in a painting, it automatically kind of your eyes glaze over. You're like, yeah, we know what you're trying to say.
Well, it pulls away the abstract in a sense, and you're like, oh, I know what that is, instead of making you lean in and wanting to know what it is, right?
Which is exactly what the parables did. They had to go ask.
Right.
They had to say, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't like, and it was Jesus himself doing this to a crowd of very diverse people. There were religious leaders there. I mean, Matthew talks about a large crowd gathering. You can assume it probably was a wide array of everybody. And how many times I'm talking about my own experience. Like when Christians are involved in the art you're going to present, like you feel this pressure to sort of present the gospel so that people can't come and say to you, like, you didn't actually share that like fully. So I'm not sure if this unsaved person who's encountering your art is really going to walk away being able to like be saved. Well, that's not necessarily the point.
Right.
The point is to like move people towards, because everything we're encountering is always like forming us, moving us towards something, shifting our views for good or for bad. We're in the same story. So like however we're engaging with it, we're still in that one story. And in today's world, like if you're trying to evangelize with art and you're putting out really like cliche Christian art, which I've done, and I took like a 2-year break of making art because I didn't know, because of the question you're asking, like people feel like they have to put in Christian symbolism that's super clear if they're Christian. And what I realize is that when you do that, I mean, people just kind of like I said, they just sort of keep walking by because they already think they know what you're trying to say, because there's so much baggage around the words that we even use. Yeah. Whereas like certain symbols might just move them towards just being able it's like the gardening of the soul. It's like moving them to be able to even receive other concepts
for sure
that you might talk about or they might encounter later.
Yeah.
But like just getting them to sort of see something in a certain way that helps them move towards a Christian worldview, to ask, what is Christian art? It's something that moves people towards understanding the world with a Christian worldview. Yeah. And that is all encompassing, because God is like, he's not separated, like here's the sacred, here's the secular. No, truth is truth, because God is sustaining all of reality. So, I mean, so like when it comes to Christian art, it's like, I always say it's anything that is presenting the Christian worldview. And that includes a reality of what sin actually is and how horrible it is. And
totally.
Like Lamentations is a horrible, horrific account. It's a poem written by an artist that God put into sacred text. How many Christians would be like, why did you put the story about the mom eating the child, or the horrible things that are in that? Like, you can't put that in Christian art.
Or like Hosea and Gomer, like being a parable essentially of Israel's prostitution to the Lord. This Sunday I'm preaching on, it's one of the most bizarre pieces of scripture. Jesus goes to get some figs off a tree. There's no figs, so he curses the tree. Yeah. And it's like, what is that? But he was enacting a parable. He was literally painting a picture for them of the dead religion of the temple, which he was just about to cleanse. Yeah. And it's like Jesus was very often communicating, with art. It's pretty cool.
I love it.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. I was just thinking about like the things I could sit down and read Wayne Grudem's systematic theology, and that would be really edifying for me, for sure. Love it. And I don't think one's better than the other, but then recently I just read through all the Narnia books again, and I was just like so ministered to because Lewis just took these theological concepts and fleshed them out through story in a way that just grabbed me, like the Magician's Nephew, where he goes back and talks about the creation account, where Aslan is like singing, Narnia into existence, and the way he portrays the White Witch found this sort of evil found its way into the garden, was already present at creation. It was like evil is already there. I'm like, whoa, that's like, so now I had read Genesis 3. I know the systematically, I know the theology of original sin, and but yet when I read that artistic telling of this theological reality, it led me to worship, and it led me to a whole, like, it opened my heart. It's like a dimensionality was opened. I went from seeing it. So I think just simply reading systematic theology is good, but it's lacking dimension, right? And that's why, like, for sermons, right? Like, you can't, you could just get up there and say, blah, 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 this is what the text says, this is what it means, sayonara. But sermons are art in that they bring illustration, and they bring people to feel the text, and to that's what the prophets did, right? They brought through, like, laying on their side for days, or for, I mean, Jeremiah like acted out the sieging of Jerusalem with like little figures and stuff, made, like, a model, right? Like, that's all art, I mean, you just can't separate, I guess, just to summarize, like, you can't separate art from theology, which was going to be my next question, but we're already kind of answering it. And sometimes people think, well, to be an artist, you have to sort of check your brain at the door, right? And just like let your feelings take over. And one of the things I love about you guys is that you guys are very theologically rooted and grounded. I mean, Mary, you're taking classes at PBC, and you love theology, and like, to see that art doesn't have to mean you can't be theologically robust in your understanding of God's word. Maybe speak to that too, and how you guys balance that, and how theology has played a part, in your guys' art.
Yeah, I think, so I was a worship leader for almost 10 years. And during that time, I wrote a lot of worship songs specifically for the church I was working at. And I was part of this band where we'd go play show. I think when you're in Bend, we played a show at your church. Yeah. And a lot of the songs were just like scripture songs initially. But I remember getting to the point where I felt like if we didn't like cram as like much scriptural truth into the song, like I thought we were like compromising, not being like faithful to like the call of a Christian. And I think the journey has been shifting from that and realizing, especially probably a lot of people it was like, oh yeah, okay. It's like, there's just so many phrases, so many like theological statements. Not to say it didn't like minister to anybody. But I feel like the songs that really had begun to move me and change the way that I write is trying to take something like Paul, for example, when I forget where he was, but he basically goes to an area where they just have so many gods, right? And then the
Areopagus.
Yeah, and then he very creative, literally goes when they say, "Oh, this is the unknown God." He's like, "Wait, I know that's the God that I know, and I'm going to tell you about that." He uses their culture, he uses their understanding, and he actually points to the truth. And so I feel like I like what you talked about in dimension. Sometimes like you have this systematic theology that is true, but it does lack a dimension because it doesn't necessarily, it can't necessarily encompass the human experience with emotions. You're like, this
it's missing
is
the human element.
The human element, which Jesus, I grew up literally hearing like, life's like a train. It goes faith. Wait, what is it? Faith, fact, feeling. So, is that right? Yeah.
I don't know.
I've
Yeah,
never
probably
heard that before.
Oh, I heard it all the time. It was like, well, feelings is at the end of the train. It's at the caboose of the train. And it was faith, then you have facts, and then you have feeling. And feeling was always like subpar to faith and fact. And you don't see Jesus living that way at all. There's such a a marrying of his feelings. He was a deeply emotional human being.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he literally weeps like over Lazarus, even though he knows he's going to raise him from the dead.
Yeah.
Because of how incredibly awful the effects of sin are, and how it was affecting the community.
Even though his systematic theology of God's sovereignty and God's determinism was airtight.
It was literally him himself.
It was literally him. He's like, I got this. But he's like seeing the pain of people. And so as far as like, it's interesting because I think there is, you do see artists, I think, go so far where it literally is only feeling, and it becomes a little like, untethered from what we would call is true,
corresponding to like actual reality.
Yeah. And it's so in your feelings. But I just think, sometimes to sing. So I always use this example. So I love hymns. I do love hymns, but I just don't think that you can in this culture only do hymns, like. Because at a certain point, and this song I love is literally "I Love You, Lord." It's the simplest song. It's literally like, I love you, Lord, and I lift my voice to worship you, my King. And you'll see how that literally actually impacts us, like a worship experience, when people hear this melody, very moving melody, very simple lyrics, not necessarily unpacking anything. It's just a moment of like genuine response, because worship, right? It's a response to seeing the beauty of God.
Right.
And so I think creating moments like that, like Mera was saying, meeting places with God, you're really just, because there's songs, there's an artist called Andy Squires, incredible songwriter, just one of my favorite songwriters. His voice isn't always for everyone, but he's like, some of his songs are seriously deep lamentation. One song is literally about losing a child. And I feel so drawn into worship God in that moment, even though it's horrifically tragic and like my biggest fear, as a parent. But you're actually creating a space for people to have those questions. Right. Like, I think God is in the questioning. He's in the,
Yes.
I agree. Yeah. I think one of the mistakes that we make in the church is, depending on who's running the church, we tend to, it's not that we tend to neglect an entire facet of God's expression of who he is and God's revelation of who he is. Like, if the church is run by a very type A, non-emotional kind of a person, the arts will probably not really be thought of or mentioned. If the church is run by a very arts focused and very feelings focused person that doesn't really like organizations, doesn't really like administration, doesn't really like systematics and stuff like that, and I think because we don't understand each other sometimes, and that we don't really make space for each other, but realizing that, like, when you step back and look at the mosaic of how God has communicated his ultimate reality through the last 2,000 years of Christian expression, everything from systematic works to books, to plays, to movies, to music. Like, God has used all of that, and he's used administrators, and he's used people that are organized and that are not feelings driven, and he's just used it all. And I think one of the things I just would seek for us at Philippi is to understand one another and to see the value of one another, and to see like that we need every personality type, because not any one of us is going to fully represent God and what God thinks and the way God feels. And God is a feeling God, and he is a creator. He is an artist. He's also very organized. He runs a tight ship, right? And he created math.
Yes.
He created science and he created art. Yeah. Art, I think, there's a rabbit trailing, but art is one of the greatest, I think, ways we can prove that God does exist. Because it's like, why does music exist? Why are you moved by it? Why does art exist? There's no function to it, right? There's no like, well, it makes sense that we would like music, and because it's, evolution explains it. It doesn't really explain it, right?
It's transcendent too. Like, when you see something, it's the whole, if there's a chair, there was a chair maker idea as well. It's like, if you see art, there was an artist somewhere doing that, making that.
Yeah, it's good. See, we only got a few more minutes here. I had some just kind of random questions that I thought might be helpful for artists listening. One of the questions I always have, and this is kind of off topic from what we've been talking about, theology and sort of big picture stuff. This is really practical. how do you know when art is done? This is something I've always wrestled with. Like, how do you know when to walk away and say, that's enough? Because you could just over tweak everything, right? Like you could change everything. Like for me, again, like my art form right now is writing sermons, and I only have a week to write a sermon. So I have to be done at some point. It has to be Thursday by 12 o'clock. I'm like done, right? Notes are printed, walk away. And it's always hard for me to know when to leave it alone, when to let the imperfections and the flaws be there, realizing that that's part of art, right? How do you guys, like, what's your thought process on that? How do you determine when to be done? Like when you're doing like Mera, let me answer this. Like when you're doing a painting or you're doing like, how do you go finished?
Yeah, that's, first of all, I love having these practical questions because it really is practical when it comes to like making art. It's so like, you can have all these like esoteric ideas over here, but then when it's like standing at the canvas, you're like, this is actually really hard. And I don't always feel good about what I'm doing. And now once I made it, what am I going to do with it? Kind of a thing. I think I've heard artists say that the best thing is to sort of set out with a goal. So like, before you start painting, define for you what the goal is of that painting. So is it to learn this specific thing that you're going to try to do in this painting? Is it to depict this one thing in the painting? Is it to explore or experiment with this certain color combination? Like try to find something that you want to accomplish when you are working on the painting. And then also to see your body of work as less of like, this is my painting and I'm going to finish it, and more of like this practice that's sort of always streaming. I know for me as a perfectionist, like deadlines are super important. And if you have to put that on yourself, then it's going to help, because for me, I could honestly just keep.
Totally.
And it comes from like this idea of self-doubt, probably for me more so than it does like,
I think for every artist,
this idea of like, I want to attain something. It's like, I just don't feel like it's good enough. So I guess I should better keep working, or I'm going to criticize it to the point that I just keep manipulating it, kind of a thing.
Right.
And I think that takes humility to be like, you know what, if it wasn't the best thing ever, that's okay. I'm going to leave it the way it is, and I'm going to practice the next one and then continue on. Like,
because I think the perfection, not that you'll ever attain perfection, but it's in the revisions, right? Like I used to like trip on writing songs because I wanted to write the best song.
Yeah.
And then I realized, like, you don't just sit down and write the best song. You write 500 terrible songs.
Oh yeah.
And then finally you end up getting a good one. And unless you're like the Beatles, and just have happened.
But they wrote so many songs before Let It Be. You know what I mean?
Right. That's true. Yeah.
Like Paul McCartney probably wrote like 600 songs before he wrote Let It Be, and not all of them were.
Yeah. And we do, like, we listen to, like, for me, I listen to my preaching heroes. I listen to Rick Boy or whatever. I'm like, dude just preaches a masterful sermon, but he's preached thousands of sermons, and it's the process of doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it. You can't just sit down with a canvas and just perfectly do it. You're going to make mistakes. And
Totally. I think there's a few ways I approach this. One, my main rule is the art has to move me. If it's not moving me, then I can't count on it actually moving people.
I like that. Yeah.
But what happens is when you work on something and you really you take this like raw element, and you're kind of like, for me, it's like, okay, this is the thing I love about this that's moving me, and now I need to make it like fill it out in a way that is still honoring to that moment. But I think so you have this initial like spark. And our whole thing is like, just go where the lightning strikes. Like if it's feeling good, like that's kind of where I'd bend rules. I'm like, well, it feels good. I don't care if we don't have 3 choruses. Like this feels good.
Right.
But at the same time, you lose that objectivity very quickly. And so one of the things, and this is definitely more in the music realm, is I usually try to have like a few people that I really trust their ears. Not even all musicians. Yeah. Actually, my wife is one of them. But I have like some producer, like
a lot of people listening are not musicians. Right?
I'm making music for non-musicians. And then I have a few people, and I just let them. And I think the first listen of their song, like without me explaining anything, is the most valuable thing you have. Because then you if they're like moved by it, you're like, all right, mission accomplished. Yeah. But if it's like, or like, what do you mean by this? It's good, and it's not. You're never going to please everybody, so you have to filter that.
Totally.
Yeah.
But the other thing, I think, and this is something that is so hard for me, but I've been trying to do this the last couple years, is the 70% rule. And
yes.
it's so good. So basically, I forget where we learned that. What's his name?
It's this YouTuber. His channel is called Struthless.
Struthless. He's the man.
It's not
Yeah. But
not that matters, but like,
he talks about the 70% rule, and he's like, there's 3 kinds of people. There's people who literally maybe create art every day, and it's just not very good. But they're just always creating. Then you have maybe people who in a period of week will create or in a period of time, they'll create maybe 2 songs, and they're like a lot better than the guy creating every day. But there's still, it's definitely a lot more work. It's definitely, and then you have this person who only creates 1 and
perfects
it,
attempts
to the point. And in his theory is that the person making art every day is actually going to continue to make better art.
Yeah.
Because they're continually just working through it, and they're not like focusing everything like this is the only song I'll ever write.
Right.
And what happens is they're actually going to write better songs. They're going to start to grow. And it's really hard, but I think the 70% rule, you're like, is it 100% good? Not like you're shooting for 70%. Is it 70% good?
It's good.
For the most part, most people are not even going to notice. So I get a song to 90%, and the last 10% is just so I feel good about it. Like no one cares.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. It's funny. I always notice like bands that I would really like, they would like put out an album and it would make them famous. It'd be that album that made them famous, but they wrote that album over the course of like a few years too, and then they would get a record deal, and then there was this expectation to crank out albums like every year. And I would notice that kind of like their quality would dip a little bit too, just come to the other side of this, where maybe, they felt so much pressure to just produce for the record label, and so I like the 70% idea, because it's not that like, it's not a 30% rule. It's not like just crank it out, baby. It's like, spend enough time, but not so much time that you're sort of obsessing on the details.
Yeah.
Let me ask one more question, then we'll wrap it up. Another practical one. What do you guys do when you feel like you're hitting a wall? So the thing about creativity, obviously, is you can't just sit down and do it. You kind of have to be in the right headspace and the right heart space. And like when you, if those that do it professionally, you can't afford to, right? You can't afford to just not feel like doing it. Like someone pays you to come in and do a mural. You can't be like, yeah, I'm not feeling it. Sorry.
Yeah.
How do you overcome those walls of like, I'm not feeling it right now,
I think that depends on the context. So if I'm producing something for another artist, there is usually a time constraint, and there usually is like, okay, got to do it. And there is days where I 100% don't feel like doing that. Like I would choose anything. I would be like, you know what? I just want to go and like ride my bike or like something. And there's those moments kind of unlock a different kind of creativity, which can be really good, because I function really well under deadlines as well. But I think like I have the hardest time writing like songs when I'm only writing songs. If I'm only like, my best writing actually just comes out of life lived. And it's ironic, but I literally am most inspired when I'm the busiest with other things, which is weird. Like with my own writing, which is annoying, because I'll be like, no, I'm going to take this 2 months and I'm just going to write like 3 or 4 songs. I'm going to put together a record. And usually those are the most unfruitful times for me. And it can be fresh. So I think basically like work with what you have, be gracious to yourself. And if you only have like, if you're frustrated because you're in school and you really want to write songs, like just use the time you have. And I honestly think that'll be, because art is really just a snapshot of you as an artist at that given point of time. Or for music, it's like you're taking, like recording, you're taking a picture of the song in that exact moment in time with those people in the room, and being okay with that. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes like I'll just have to take a break from a certain artistic endeavor if time allows, and be like, okay, I'm going to breathe. I don't know.
Have you guys seen the movie The Man Who Invented Christmas?
No.
Oh, dude, it's so good. It's about, what's his name? The guy that wrote Christmas Carol in David Copperfield, and I forget his name. Anyways, it's about his process of writing The Christmas Carol, and it's so good. Cool. It's like a perfect eye into the mind of an artist trying to design and create something. And he's trying to come up with characters, and he just spends so much time walking London, and the different characters all of a sudden appear, and they're like there in his mind, and he runs home really quick to write, and that's how I feel with my creative process. It's like, it's almost never when I'm sitting at my desk. Like this week, even I think my introduction for my sermon came to me while I was walking literally a block down that way. My conclusion came to me while I was at Fred Meyer getting something. You know what I mean? The other one was like in my car driving. Like those are the times I feel like that the things come to you.
Yeah.
Now that might be different, I wonder, in what you do, because for me it's like I could just jot it down and it's in a scrap of paper. Yeah. But you know, what does that look like for you, Mera, in terms of overcoming block in
actual painting?
Yeah.
Like the physical act of it, or like the
concept.
Yeah, maybe either
block.
one. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm still learning how to overcome the physical block. Like if you don't feel like painting, you know what I mean? Like I'm not the best at that. Like I'm not the best at taking action when I don't feel like it. That's like one of my problems. So I'm still learning how to do that.
Me too.
Yeah, but as far as like, I love the creative part of it. So my mind is always kind of, I don't know, using every day as like fuel to the fire kind of a thing. I think when I'm with my kids, I know that might not be the answer everyone wants, but in regards to like when we're, like you were saying, when we're confined, like, so if we have to go to work and we're working our day job, or we're with our kids, or we're at a place where we can't actually be like creative, I feel like sometimes, like you were just saying, like creative ideas start to sort of sprout out because there's not like this pressure, like you're watching the seed sprout. It's like, oh wait, this connects to that, and I can see the connection here, and I'm actually really moved in this moment, so let me ask why, and is there something there that I want to explore that I can go into?
Yes, that's so good. Because I think the creative moment, the initial spark, that is like probably the most exciting part of creation.
Right.
Is like,
that's true.
It is.
Yeah.
It's like the
also
potential.
the most scary, because you're like, am I going to be able to execute on that? Like,
and then there's expectations.
I think
for you
if you
to
own that moment, and then like a lot of it's still just work.
Yeah.
Like it can get tedious.
Totally.
And so I think the expectation that you have to have that feeling the whole time is crippling, because then you're not able to, you're like, oh, well, is this even good? It's like really, I think it's, if there's a way, like if you're a songwriter, like that iPhone demo, the first time you're just in your room and you're feeling it and you're moved by it. Like trust that, not that you can't like maybe make some alterations or something, but like at that point you just have to like do the work, even if you don't.
It's true.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's a blend of just straight up labor and excitement. Like I don't know why when you were talking, I just got a picture of a guy making a canoe out of a log. It's like, he's this idea, like I'm going to turn that into a canoe. So that's like 2% of like shaping and like 98% just like chopping wood, trying to get it out of there. Right.
So
like,
true.
I don't know. And that's, I think, where discipline does come in the arts. Like it's not all just feeling. It's like you need to sit down, and sometimes I just need to force myself. Like I am not getting out of this chair until I have at least. Other times it's like I need to go for a walk because I'm just. But I think the difference is like, are you in the conceptual phase or are you in the executing phase? And if you are in the conceptual phase, you can't force yourself. Like, but if you're like, hey, look, I know what I need to do. I need to color in this section.
Yes,
I'm gonna just do that.
Yeah.
Right? So
love it.
Yeah.
Well, guys, a couple things. First of all, I want to just plug the upcoming Ascend conference.
Yes.
That for those of you guys that are not familiar with that, I mean, you guys could probably explain that a lot better. But every year for how many years now? Like 15 or something?
Jeannie Randall, who's the person who runs Masterpiece Christian Fine Arts. Yeah, she's been running an arts conference. Yeah. I don't know how many years, but a long time. And she's an amazing supporter of the arts. That woman loves art.
Yeah.
So
last year I kind of went and checked it out. We had a bunch of people from Philippi that went, and you guys are both instructors there and lead classes and breakouts and are involved. And it's a really rad place for Christian artists, whether that's recording artists or music artists or painting. I forget what all the different tracks.
They have film,
in production. So there's just a lot of different tracks. And so if you're interested in that, but you'll go to ascendashland.com and all the information.
It's actually Ascend West Coast, right?
I think that you would get redirected if you did ascendashland.com.
Cool.
Weird. Okay.
And there's also ascendwestcoast.com.
I'm going to put in the description of this video, I'm going to put the right link.
Cool.
Yeah. I just visited the link, and I know that link was updated, and I think she has it directing you because at a certain point it was hosted.
Well, I Googled Ascend Southern Oregon and that came up. Yeah. So if you just Google that, you'll find it.
Same thing.
It's incredible. It's this. So that version of it was initially kind of directed to youth. We did one in 2019 before the world shut down. And it was done at the Story, and typically her artist retreats and conferences were just kind of geared towards like any age. So we initially tried to focus on like the youth, but we have since broadened that just due to the area and the kind of people interested were like, wait, I'm 36. Can I come do this?
Yeah.
You know?
Nowadays, it's
and
like,
now
what's
we're getting older. We're like, well, I guess
cool.
we can't go.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Wait a
Yeah.
minute. Well, anyways, that's July 15 and 16.
Yes.
And it's going to be at Jacksonville Press this year. Right. It's a different place every year.
Yeah.
I'm hoping one of these years we can host it. That'd be really cool. But this year, Jacksonville Press. And then one last thing, how can people check out each of your guys' work? So, maybe just quick, how could, like, if someone said, I really want to see Mera's art, do you have like a place online that people can kind of check that out, or do you do like Instagram? Or
right now I only have it on Instagram. So it's at Mera, Mera, Olive, Olive. Mera Olive.
Your name is spelled Mera?
Yes.
So glad you told me that.
Well, and then I left off the ending of Oliveria because, that silent I. So it's just Mera Olive, Olive. The actual olive.
And people can see your work there.
Yeah. So that's the only place I have my art posted right now.
Great. And then your music is all, the thing with your music is you have it under so many different, because you had Pilgrim Song, and then you had Rug Valley Fellowship, and now you have just Jeremy Oliveria. Yeah. But it's all on iTunes.
It's all on iTunes.
And Spotify.
Everything. Yeah.
Cool.
And then my production side of things, just to plug that, is stereocreature.com.
Cool.
Stereocreature.
So if you're looking to record an album, and you're working with Trevor Hanks right now.
Yeah, Trevor.
Our boy.
He's our boy.
Pretty exciting. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you guys.
And Christina Hanks.
For your time. Yeah. Trevor and Christina. Is she on the album too?
She's doing some of her own stuff.
She's recording,
Nice. That's awesome.
She just released a song. A couple days ago.
That,
yeah, I'm gonna plug it.
Yeah.
No way. I gotta hear it. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you guys. And man, super good thoughts. I'm gonna be chewing on this stuff for a while. So let me just pray real quick for you guys. Lord, bless these guys as they continue to serve you with their creativity and their art, Lord. And I'm just so thankful, Lord, to be able to just partner with them and be part of the body with them. And I pray for everybody listening that would just be inspired to go create for the glory of God, Lord, that they would go and see just the power of what we can do through the arts, Lord. And we pray for our church and for all churches, Lord, that they would see the value of art and find a way to integrate it, Lord, into our worship expression in the way that we glorify you, Father. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Peace.
Mm-hmm.